E3 2018 is an event where a bunch of game developers and publishers beat their meats in front of thousands of people about their latest games in order to do nothing but hyping the consumers and disappointing them later on. In this video, I'm gonna pretty much recap every single one of the game developers and publishers being presented and giving my 2 cents on the entire thing. Since it's the games announcements that truly matter the most, let's focus on the games announcements. The first one to show is pretty much the one that nobody anticipates, EA, which stands for Electronic Asswipes. EA is producing electronic arts the same way your anus produces a healthy breakfast menu. Their games do nothing but exploit you, your time, and your money. They might be visually impressive, but the gameplay department and the consumer milking department of their last couple of games have made a lot of consumers to roll their eyes. It's all to the point where during the event, people clap when they say that there will be no loot boxes and season passes. How is it that we're living in a time where game publishers are celebrated for not having anti-consumer practices? It's quite indicative of the time that we're living in, which is a time where game publishers only care about milking money, which is different to making money because making money is perfectly legitimate, while milking money sounds like absolute desperation, which perfectly describes the state of EA if FIFA wasn't around giving them cash. And speaking of making money, that's the reason why I'm shilling my Patreon for today. Huge thanks to Jinzo Crash, Christian, Adam, and Dude5 for the pledges on Patreon. You guys are fantastic. Going back to EA, they're certainly on the brink of their desperation, what with their upcoming games range from incredibly underwhelming to "It's time to stop!" Let's get to games that should have gotten a little bit more spotlight out of the way first. There's a sequel to the indie game Unravel, which I haven't played, but it looks quite alright. It has a co-op focus and it's gonna be released at... Wait, what? It's released today? It barely has any marketing and it's released today? The next one is an interesting game by the name of Sea of Solitude, which looks like it's gonna be a game about loneliness. It's mostly in-game footage, but there's really no gameplay. There are set pieces presentation, but no gameplay. 2 of the EA's most interesting games are unfortunately being set aside for their biggest hitters. And now for EA's major titles, which are unfortunately quite boring. FIFA! I'm just saying that name makes me yawn. Then you have the official multiplayer trailer for Battlefield 5, which is just as every bit as confusing as their last trailer. And then there's Anthem, which looks about as exciting as watching people walk. EA's E3 could have been just merely a bore fest, but this is EA we're talking here, and what better way to conclude this EA's E3 recap with something that just straight up pisses everyone on earth, and this includes everyone who is not even a fan of the franchise that EA is dumping their loads in. So the next thing that they did is to piss off Command & Conquer fans, as their next Command & Conquer game is, brace yourselves, a freaking mobile game. That's right, instead of getting a proper Command & Conquer game after the 4th one was notoriously divisive to say the least, we instead get a mobile game. A goddamn freaking mobile game. So that's EA's E3 2018. Nothing worthy of note, and the ones worthy of note should be used as a proper example for future generations and not screwing up a franchise. Microsoft's E3 is certainly better than EA's, but that's because EA sets the standard so low, watching paint dry got me more excited than EA. Microsoft, on the other hand, have tons and tons of games from multiple game developers, and they did a fine job making people excited for the upcoming games. Let's check out some of the highlights, or at least some of the games that I would consider to be interesting. The first game that came into the spotlight is Halo Infinite. The last 2 Halo games have been rather controversial and divisive to say the least, so Microsoft really have to do something in order to win the fans back. For the record, I'm not a Halo fan, but even Halo fans are setting their expectations low with this one to prepare themselves for future disappointments. A new Ori game! Yes! The first one was visually stunning and has great story, so I have high expectations for this one. A new original story from Donut that takes place in the Life is Strange universe called The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit? Meh, I don't even know if there's actual gameplay in it. Kingdom Hearts 3. This game's announced quite a lot of times in many conferences on E3, and the hype is getting lower and lower as I watch it. Not a fan of the other Kingdom Hearts games, but this game have all of the latest Disney flick characters, including Pirates of the Caribbean for some reason. So if you're into that sort of thing, definitely get hyped for this one. We Happy Few. It's going to be released a couple of months anyway, so not really worth mentioning. A Cuphead DLC? Now that is just swell. New bosses, new playable characters, and still on them old aesthetics. A great day for another swell battle. Also, delicious last course, DLC, Very clever. A new From Software game that was teased back in the Game Awards, I think, that isn't actually a Bloodborne DLC as people speculated. It's actually a game called Sekiro, which is basically their take on Nioh. Interesting, but I would love to see another Tenchu game. Metro Exodus, which I already know from past trailers, and I don't really need to see any gameplay footage from this one to know that I am excited. The other Metro games are some of the best first-person shooters out there, with a great narrative, solid single-player campaigns, and surprisingly very faithful to the novels. Highly recommended if you haven't played them yet. Crackdown 3. Just Cause 4, which is just another another Just Cause game in which there are tons of vehicle destructions, explosions, and Rico Rodriguez being Rico Rodriguez fighting against a freaking tornado. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is supposedly gonna be a darker take on the reboot Tomb Raider. I'm not exactly a big fan of the reboot Tomb Raider games because Lara Croft is about as exciting as a blank sheet of paper, but this one has a lot more emphasis in the Predator aspects. The visuals look as stunning as ever, and Lara Croft actually looks mature, even if she still sounds like a teenager.
If you had that power, what would you do?
I mean, come on guys, at least try to make her sound a little older. Still, I cannot wait for this game, and I cannot wait for it to become the next game to be our PC benchmark utilities. Dying Light 2, the first one I consider to be one of the best games of the last couple of years. Hopefully the sequel can meet up to my expectations because from what I've seen in the trailer, I am not too impressed. TUNIC is one of the few new IPs and it looks quite interesting. It's basically Zelda except you play as a cute fox and that's pretty cool. Can't wait to play that one. Gears of War 5, which Microsoft trolls everyone by thinking that the next installment will be just the characters turned into Funko Pops. But the actual Gears of War 5 eventually come in and it's called Gears 5 for some reason and people are excited. And the event ends with Cyberpunk 2077, which is a game that pretty much everyone is anticipating and yet there are no gameplay footages. It's just a pre-rendered trailer showing the universe that is pretty bright and sunny. A lot of people have high hopes with CD Projekt Red. Their latest games have been impressive and Cyberpunk 2077 certainly looks impressive. For me, the absolute highlight of this conference are two games. The first one being Devil May Cry 5. This one got some people confused because they thought that the guy that you play as is New Dante. But as pretty much every Devil May Cry fan can attest, this character over here is Nero, as evidenced by his right freaking arm. And then the actual Dante shows up to kick some demon ass as well. When are we going to see a featuring Demi-Fiend from the Shin Megami Tensei series tag? The game is strangely enough looking like a mixture of the new DMC aesthetics with the old DMC aesthetics. So we're not sure if we're gonna have Bill O'Reilly as our boss again, but as much as people love to crap on DMC Squared for its lackluster story and characters, the gameplay is actually pretty solid and enjoyable. So I'm looking forward for Capcom's take on this one and see if they can make it at least as every bit as frustrating as Dark Souls fans trying to play Bayonetta. And the second one is the surprising reintroduction of Battle Stadium DON. Yes, you remember Battle Stadium DON, that PS2 crossover game of three of the biggest anime franchises that would whet every weeb in existence. Well, here they are, returning in the form of Jump Force, an infinitely lamer title. What the hell is wrong with Battle Stadium DON? That sounds kick freaking ass. Jump Force reminds me of something that would come out of my high school physics class. Well, there's gonna be something wrong with Battle Stadium DON because it should have been named Battle Stadium DOND as another fighter jumps into the fray. Ryuk and Light Yagami from Death Note. What? This is starting to sound like a glorified fanfiction. In DON, it makes total sense to cross over all of those three franchises because they are primarily action anime. But Death Note is a mystery anime. It's like a crossover of Tekken, Street Fighter, and Dead or Alive featuring Sherlock Holmes. Or a crossover between Marvel and Capcom characters and then suddenly add Phoenix Wright. Oh wait, why not My Hero Academia? Or One Punch Man? Actually, let's not do One Punch Man because Saitama can pretty much destroy anyone. Or can he? Also, what's with the ultra-realistic graphics? The new Battle Stadium DON, I know it's called Jump Force, but screw that title, has realistic graphics that make the characters look really jarring. I mean, guys, the Ninja Storm cel-shaded graphics work just fine. Hell, the PS2 cel-shaded graphics work just fine. Don't go with this ultra-realistic thing. It looks bafflingly gritty. Whatever, Battle Stadium DON is back, and yes, I'm gonna call it Battle Stadium DON because Jump Force sounds like what would happen if I ram my ass with a nitrous oxide. Bethesda's E3 presentation was actually quite ambitious. It's mostly a showcase of Fallout 76 and Elder Scrolls, which isn't so surprising for Bethesda, but putting Fallout 76 and Elder Scrolls aside, are there any other games from them being showcased? Well, the first one that got a lot of people cringing was Rage 2. Despite the rather cringe early 2000s rock track, the game looks quite fun, and I like that they have the creators of Just Cause and Mad Max, which will definitely fix the lackluster car combat from the first Rage. I still need to play it for myself though, and at least they're putting some effort in making it. Wolfenstein Youngblood is a game where you play as BJ's twin daughters? Doom Eternal is the sequel to Doom, which will take place on Earth. Absolutely freaking awesome. Starfield is one of their newest IPs, but like the latest entry on the Elder Scrolls series, there's really nothing much other than a teaser. So Fallout 76 is basically just Fallout 4, except now you have multiplayer. There's a lot of emphasis in crafting and world building rather than the exploration and the combat. You can also drop nukes the same way you did in Fallout 3, but unlike Fallout 3, you can pretty much drop it anywhere other than Megaton. I really like the enemy varieties. I really want Fallout games to give that sense of dread, but at the end of the day, it still looks and plays like Fallout 4, and Fallout 4 was quite underwhelming for a lot of people. As for Elder Scrolls, other than adding more content to their already existing Elder Scrolls games, the new Elder Scrolls game is a mobile one, and unlike Command & Conquer, I'm actually interested with this one. Less on the actual game and more so on the premise. Elder Scrolls Blades is a rather ambitious mobile version of Elder Scrolls. Yes, you heard that right, a mobile version of Elder Scrolls. Not Fallout Shelter, but a full-on Elder Scrolls games. Okay, it's not entirely a full Elder Scrolls game, it's incredibly restrictive with the Android limitations, or mobile limitations in general, but this is still a rather ambitious project that they have.
And the entire game can be played in portrait mode. You never know when you'll need a free hand. To hold your coffee, what do you... Degenerates.
Degenerates like you belong on a cross.
But at the end of the day, Bethesda's E3 conference was quite alright, if a bit ambitious at a lot of parts. There's clear passion and signs of wanting to experiment and improve upon their predecessors, but unfortunately the things that they want to improve on the predecessors just doesn't really stimulate me. It's a lot more emphasis on experimentation rather than an attempt to improve, but overall, it's definitely better than EA's E3 presentation. You might find this surprising, but Devolver Digital is one of the few publishers on E3 that I'm actually anticipating. The reason is because their past few conferences have been rather insane, and by insane I mean, you know what, I'm not gonna waste too much time on this. How about instead I tell you that you should watch this one by yourself. Go watch Devolver Digital's own E3 conference at 2018. It's only 30 minutes long, and they don't have too many games announced, but it is one hell of a spectacle. As for the games being announced, my friend Pedro looks tons and tons of fun, and the game that got so many people's jimmies up and running is From Software's old game, Metal Wolf Chaos, which contains the dreaded word Mech America Great Again, and causes every progressive to just lose their freaking minds. The game looks pretty freaking badass, and it makes it more badass to know that a bunch of snowflakes are really pissed at it. I'm going to make the Square Enix part short because that's how their show went. They are actually pretty damn short. There are great games being announced on Square Enix's E3 conference, but most of the games are already announced on Microsoft, and they merely just show a little glimpse of gameplay. The games being announced are already shown at the previous conferences, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Just Cause 4, Kingdom Hearts 3, and Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. The rest of the games, or at least the new ones that aren't mere updates, are Dragon Quest XI, Octopath Traveler, and The Quiet Man, which is a really odd entry out of all of them. It's quite disappointing that the Square Enix E3 was really damn short, and that's one of the conferences that I'm really looking forward to. It doesn't have its own stage, it's just a series of montages. While all of the games are interesting, I don't think it's enough to create a huge impression on me. At least Devolver has the stage. Unfortunately, Square Enix ends up being my third worst merely for not trying, and EA being the first for trying and failing miserably. Then we have the next conference, which is in my opinion my second worst conference. Ubisoft's conference is, in my opinion, the second worst. They introduced nothing interesting, and pretty much all of their games being shown don't really look impressive, with the exception of a couple of their upcoming titles. The entire show is predictable, boring, and some of the gameplay sessions, while appreciated, goes a little bit too long. Beyond Good and Evil 2 looks pretty dope, and it's the only one from Ubisoft that I legitimately anticipate. But the game doesn't have a release date yet, so might as well go back and play the original first while you're at it. Starlink Battle for Atlas is a really interesting game, especially with the addition of Star Fox joining in the fray. For Honor adds the Three Kingdoms into the mix, which is quite surprising, but this isn't really a new game and just another addition into an entirely existing game. The Division 2 is the sequel to, well, The Division, a game that I played a while ago and thought it was quite boring. Some people say that The Division got better as time went on, but I am not exactly thrilled with this one. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is by far the most un-Assassin's Creed game that I've seen. What I'm seeing here is not Assassin's Creed at all. This is essentially an open world version of Rise Son of Rome, and Rise Son of Rome was a boring slog. And finally, Ubisoft's take on the whole pirates genre, Skulls and Bones, which is basically them saying, hey, let's take the gameplay of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag and make it to our own game. And it shows, because this game is just Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. No changes on the formula, no changes on the presentation, just Assassin's Creed 4 all over again. While Assassin's Creed 4 is one of the few good Assassin's Creed games that I legitimately enjoyed, I think Skulls and Bones really need to do a little bit more to be different than that. And my god, I appreciate the gameplay, Ubisoft, but 16 minutes is just really padding it. And that's what I don't like about Ubisoft's conference in a nutshell. It was awfully padded. Thankfully, the boring padded slog that was Ubisoft's presentation is continued with my personal favorite E3 presentation. PC Gaming Show is easily my favorite conference out of all of this. The hosts are great, the games being shown look promising and spectacular, and most importantly, they actually show new IPs after new IPs after new IPs. It's really not boring. The pacing for the most part is pretty good, even though it's a tad bit longer than I expected, but still, the show is quite engaging from start to finish. There are so many new IPs that I really lost count for this one. A lot of them looks pretty sick and interesting. The most notable one for me is Man-Eater, where you play as a shark and you eat people. That's right, you play as a shark and you eat people. And there are so many new IPs out there, to describe all of them would drag this video for a bit too long. But for me, the absolute killing blow of E3 appears in the form of one company. In just a couple of minutes, I am screaming and squealing like a freaking fanboy. Yakuza. Yakuza Kiwami 3? 345? For the PS4? Wait! PC! No! No! No way! No! No! No way! No! Stop! Stop! Yakuza on PC! That's insane! I gotta... No, you're pulling my leg, Sega. I gotta be dreaming. No, this can't be real. This can't be real. Yakuza and Yakuza 0. No fucking way! No fucking way! Yes! 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 Sony's conference is all around okay. It's not exactly the best conference, but it's not exactly the worst conference either. There are tons of heavy hitters and exclusives, but there are also some really awkward moments, and it does take a while to actually get to the good stuff. This is certainly better than Bethesda's conference for me, because unlike Bethesda, there are games that I am legit hyped about, while Bethesda can only excite so much with their franchises. So let's get into the big guns. There's a lot of gameplay in The Last of Us Part 2, which I'm not really sure if it's supposed to be scripted or if it's organic gameplay. There's a really insane mood whiplash transitioning between the killings and lesbian Ellie, but I'm not really sure where Naughty Dog is going for with this story. And Joel is nowhere to be seen, so maybe this is a Telltale's Walking Dead Season 1 to Season 2 transition? Resident Evil 2 Remake looks freaking dank. It's gonna return into the hellhole that is Raccoon City and making it just as terrorizing as it was in the original Resident Evil 2, except undoubtedly not as cheesy. Leon looks really well on his rookie years, Sherry looks just about as helpless as ever, and my gal Claire looks, rather odd, at least assuming that was clear. Anyway, I cannot wait for this game. I love what Capcom did with 7 and both of the Revelations game, and I cannot wait for this one. Insomniac's Spider-Man looks rather janky and weird. As much as I'm looking forward to play this game really doesn't look promising. Insomniac always had a reputation of making rather middling games, and this one seems to be no exception. However, the game is going to be released in a couple of months anyway, so I'll reserve my full judgment until when I play the actual game. Death Stranding, the new game by Hideo Kojima, confuses the living hell out of me just like their last trailer confuses the living hell out of me. There are certainly a lot of gameplay, and by that I mean tons and tons of walking around doing nothing. This is supposed to be an open world survivor horror game of some sort, but as far as that goes, my dubbed sense is just tingling. Still, it's a game by Hideo Kojima, and every game that he made always bumps my interest. Ghost of Tsushima is one of the games that Sony spent quite a lot of time in. It's a game from Sucker Punch, the developers of Infamous, and knowing their track records of Sony exclusivity, I suppose this game is just going to be an exclusive as well. The gameplay looks pretty nice. It shows stealth elements and some of the basic samurai combat, although the English voice acting in the game sets in Japan gets a little bit distracting. Nioh 2 was announced pretty briefly, and there's really nothing much to say about it other than it's Nioh 2. Actually, we have 3 samurai-based games announced this year: Sekiro, Nioh 2, and Ghost of Tsushima. I'm not sure if these guys are gonna start a fight anytime soon. Control is another game by Remedy, the guys behind Alan Wake, Quantum Break, and one of my favorite games of all time, Max Payne. Quantum Break wasn't exactly stimulating, and this one felt just like their attempt at Quantum Break 2, except without the whole TV series nonsense hanging on their back. I mean, it looks dope, just please for the love of God scrap the TV series stuff. Once again, tons and tons of heavyweights, but the overall show was just a constant stream of those. I would say it's better than Square Enix and slightly better than Bethesda, because at least they show some games that I really want to see. So without further ado, I think we're just gonna move on into the grand finale. Can Nintendo actually bring up the good stuff and be in the top of everyone else at E3 this year? No, they don't. Or at least they don't on the E3 conference, because their E3 segment is just a venue for them to talk about Smash. That's it. It's just Smash and nothing else really. It's utterly disappointing. I'm expecting a little bit more with Nintendo on E3, but apparently my hopes and dreams are crushed, or at least it is crushed on the E3 segment. Should I really have to get to their Treehouse events and talk about games that are not announced in their E3 segment? No. The only thing that they present the most is Smash, and they present this one meticulously to be fair, but for a casual fan like me, I don't think that's enough. There are games that they present in the initial montage like Octopath Traveler, the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, a new Fire Emblem game, Super Mario Party, but they didn't go in depth about them or didn't show them as meticulously as they should be in the conference. Now, a lot of people told me that this is day one and that they're gonna have more announcements in the future, but this is their conference day, and their conference day was Smash and a couple of other games. I don't think there will be any surprises for Nintendo this year, but please, for the love of God, prove me wrong on that, Nintendo. E3 2018 has its up and downs, but overall, I don't think it's worth it for any casual audience to follow it meticulously. Just wait until it's done and focus on the games being announced, or focus on someone like me who just sum it up. From the worst to the best conferences, at least for me, here are the orders. The worst one had to be EA for not only providing a really boring show with almost nothing interesting, but also insulting over the legacy of Command & Conquer. Ubisoft is right on the top of that merely for being just all around boring and not putting any sorts of risks. Nintendo, it breaks my heart for me to put you right on the top of Ubisoft, but unfortunately, oversaturating one game for your entire show and saving other games for your other shows is just not good enough for the E3 conference competition alone. Square Enix doesn't even try to put any conference, and it's unfortunately short, but at least they show the games and get straight to the point. Bethesda takes a lot more risks, experiments in a lot more new stuff, and actually shows some interesting games, but they're still sticking on the safe zone of their franchises, and even the games that they publish really need to do more to gain my interest. Devolver Digital is short but incredibly sweet. It does what it does best, which is providing great entertainment and satire of the E3 conference as a whole, but really needs a little bit more games to bump itself up. Sony brings out the big guns and provides a relatively entertaining display. Compared to the rest, I think their show is flawed, but actually pretty legitimately decent, and there are tons of interesting games to talk about. Microsoft surprisingly steals the show. Out of all of the conference, how the hell can Microsoft end up being the best? It's very simple, really. It's not just the presentation of the show, but the games being presented are legitimately interesting and definitely give a lot more materials to talk about. Microsoft is without a doubt the best, and it's gonna be the best in pretty much almost all of people talking about E3 2018. Which leaves us to the PC gaming show, which is my personal favorite because unlike Microsoft, which mostly brings out sequels, PC gaming shows actually brings out new IPs that are actually interesting in one way or the other. The announcement from Sega easily steals the show for me, and it's the one that genuinely makes me hype for the future. Microsoft might be better objectively, but the PC gaming show has many things that legit got me personally hyped. So there you have it, another installment of E3. It's been a roller coaster from the start, and I cannot wait for what kind of roller coaster that the future will give to us.